First of all, we kind of just curious about what was your relationship to Eurovision when you were younger? Like, were you drawn to it?
Yeah, I'm from Belgium, so we were part of Eurovision from the very beginning, and it's really something that, especially during my childhood, really was as important as football matches. It's just something that we all would get together for, with sometimes the whole family even, and we would watch it together, and you would give points, and you would, as a queer man, you're already drawn to all the glamour that goes with Eurovision. So that definitely made it even more attractive for me.
Was there an act that really drew you into it?
I think something like Euphoria by Loreen was something that definitely changed the trajectory of Eurovision. And it was also one of the first songs in a long time that really had an international following and that had chart success in the UK, which hasn't happened a lot before. I just remember sitting in front of the telly with, my friends and a glass of wine and watching her perform. And it's quite amazing that 11 years later, I'm on the same stage with her. That was a bit of a mind-blowing thing.
I mean, you came out fairly early, right? So can you talk a little bit about what that was like and how Eurovision kind of played into that?
Yeah, I came out, I think I was 14, so it must have been 1995. But I was lucky enough to have a family first and foremost, my parents and my brother, who really surrounded me with love. And like when I was 7 years old, I really wanted to do like this lip sync contest we have in Belgium. And I wanted to be Madonna. And they were like, we'll get you the wig, we'll get you the shoes. It's all good. So I never that instills a sort of like a self-love that is irreplaceable, I believe. And then hearing stories from other queer friends of mine and where they had it very hard, I had it very easy in that sense. I think to go on to the theme of Eurovision, Because of You is a song about just in general family. And in my sense, it was also about chosen family. But at the same time, yeah, it's a great ode to my parents and my brother and the love that I received. Because the song is really about celebrating yourself, but knowing that that's impossible without thanking the people who brought you to the place of self-acceptance.
You said around 95 is when you came out. And then just a few years later, Eurovision has an openly trans winner.
You would never associate the word punk with Eurovision, but the attitude is punk to me. Because, yeah, I remember watching Dana International win in 98. And it was very much like, it was a huge deal everywhere. Like it was very much embraced in my memory of it. And I still find that quite punk because, it was the 90s. And for something like this to happen and to give it that visibility, maybe I'm naive, but I do think that might have had something of an impact on other countries and seeing what is possible. It is a sign of hope that you give to people who don't necessarily have that hope yet. Right. And I find that very, very good.
And I guess it probably was around the same time that you released your first single, Gonna Lose You, at 17, under the artist name Stefan. Can you talk about how that all came about and what was it like to launch a career that young?
I started singing and making music from very early on and writing songs when I was about 12. I was already in the process of recording my own music in studios by the time I was 14, 15 years old. So I signed my first deal at 17. And I think the song came out when I was 18. Gonna Lose You was actually about one of my first crushes that I had on a boy. And the whole I'm falling in love with a straight boy when you're like 14 years old, that kind of story. We all know the story, I think.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
So it was a very personal song for me. It felt like a dream come true because in Belgium it took off and I became something of a pop star here. But then it quickly became clear that I wasn't willing to take the steps that were expected from pop stars in those days, which meant hiding my sexuality, which meant catering to what they presumed would be my audience, which was for them teenage girls. It was really said to me like, so we don't mind you having a boyfriend or being gay or even being flamboyant. Just don't do that on stage, please, because we have to sell records. I consider that a great gift because it made me realize where my priorities are and where my integrity lies.
Well, was that something you grappled with? Because it is kind of hard to you want to keep the authenticity, but also kind of turning down these things that you've been wanting. It must have been tough as well.
I think sometimes you go more with your gut when you're young because you don't really have the full cerebral capacity sometimes to think about these things. But I really felt something guttural that was really wrong. This isn't what I wanted it to be, and now I'm done. But I think there was always this sense of hope. I can be a singer, I can be an arranger, I can be a vocal coach, I can be a backing vocalist, I can produce, I can write.
Well, and I think that does really, I mean, separate you from a lot of other, pop artists. I'd imagine that there are ways in which all of those different sides of your life inform each other.
I do think playing all those roles in the industry, it gave me a sense of safety because I knew I can do all these things and I can make a living out of this. But it also made me sometimes more ambitious. Like with Eurovision, I was a backing vocalist twice, and I really started to feel like I think I want to be up front there. I think I want to be part of this. But it was because I really had a chance twice to see the beast from within. Just literally also seeing how simple things like how first rehearsals and second rehearsals are watched upon with like such a magnitude of people who are giving their opinion, and how that informs the bookmakers and how that will inform your positioning. All that kind of stuff, I think, is you have to be aware of that as an artist. Well, they changed the rules this year where the BBC were only allowed to be inside of the arena when we did your first and second rehearsals. Whereas before, it was all on YouTube and everyone could follow the rehearsals from all over the world. But nonetheless, I was acutely aware of the fact that it was still being watched and people would see the video. And I told everyone who was there with me, doesn't matter if it's rehearsal, you have to be on stage like it's your performance of the night, because that's how people will look at you.
You were in that unique situation to have that, knowledge firsthand.
Even though I was prepared for structural things that I experienced in Eurovision, being on that stage and doing what I had to do was still, because it was the first time I did it as a solo artist, so it was still very new. Because when we arrived in Liverpool, I think my position was 32nd out of 37 contestants. But I did realize that my act was going to elevate it as well. So I'm very happy that kind of was rewarded.
We talked about leaving Stefan behind earlier and then now landing on Gustaph. And how did you sort of decide on that name?
I realized I still had a lot of ambitions as a solo artist, but I did feel I had to break away from this Stefan story because it was still something that was hurting. And Gustaph became like a manifestation of an artist that didn't have to make compromises, that could be openly queer, that could involve themes about queerness in his music.
As a solo artist, you kind of entered the music industry in two different times that had very different ways they looked at queer artists. Did you feel like kind of Gustaph got to heal some of the pain that Stefan experienced?
Yes, that's a very good metaphor. Even though it wasn't particularly written with the idea that I wanted to do that on Eurovision, because it wasn't written for Eurovision, the song. I wrote it with Jawad Halul, a fellow queer artist. But the song was definitely, everything we wrote together was about freedom of expression, about celebration. To go to Eurovision and to go through to the final, to be in 7th place in the end, it did feel like an embrace from Europe. And that feels like a great pat on the shoulder for someone who was rejected for their sexuality 20 years ago.
I mean, I think part of that, I mean, and you've said this before, is that like you actually had your chosen family on stage with you, right? And so can you talk about how that sort of ties into the way that you want to communicate queer culture to a broader audience?
Being on stage with like Monique Harkum, Chantal Cascella, and Sandrine van Handenhoven are 3 singers and friends of mine that I've worked with for over 20 years. Like the person I've become as a singer, as an artist, was completely informed by these 3 people. Lola and Veronica, the 2 drag queens, are friends of mine. I worked at their parties here in Belgium a lot. And then my husband, who did all the visuals, and he's my visual director for everything. He does my videos, he does my pictures, does everything. He was right there on the side of the stage. There are going to be moments when you feel, I had them for sure, where you feel like, oh my God, can I do this? And so they know exactly how to be with you, how to kind of like make you chill out.
And how was it like working with your husband as the visual director? Was it tense at all?
Yeah, and I understand the question because I get asked the question a lot. But honestly, it was lovely. But I know friends of mine who work together as well, and it can become tense, and it can become sometimes when they give a work-related comment, it feels like it's an emotional comment, and then then that starts up a fight. I'm just trying to paint a picture. But with us,
once again, completely unfamiliar with that.
I think it speaks to what you were saying about the chosen family, which I think just again speaks to this sort of unapologetic queerness of it all.
No, I want to say that with the unapologetic thing, it's true. I think for me, like here in Belgium, for example, while Belgium is definitely an open-minded country, there was still, especially when I won the national final, there was a lot of backlash and a lot of homophobic comments and hatred for me. But I did make a point of any time they did an interview, I always said my husband, and I knew that would be a normalization for people who maybe don't have that reference. And I think it did work because I did get a lot of comments by the end, like, I love you and your husband, like little grandmothers who just come up to us like, we think you're so adorable and so cute.
You did mention some backlash that you got after your Eurovision win. Can you talk about that?
So I do understand that people have favorites and that some people will go quite far to defend their favorites. But where I draw the line is where it becomes personal. For example, I won with 1 point in my national final here in Belgium, and that already caused controversy. Plus, I'm known in the industry, but I'm not known on a mainstream level here. They found a stick to hit me with. Like, you didn't deserve this, so now we can call you a fag. Like, if people want to call me what they want to call me, I couldn't change their minds. But if I was 20 years younger, I think I would have had a much harder time because, I'm 43 at this point. I'm married. And just growing older in generally makes you give less Fs. So, that definitely helped. But I do think, you shouldn't underestimate what that does to a person. Because even for me, if someone who has some experience, I did have to sometimes really consciously put it aside, mentally especially.
This concept of culture wars is such a huge talking point here. I find that a lot of American talking points, they travel. I'm curious if you saw that some of that backlash might have been fueled by some of this.
What I will say, of course, is that, by especially something like TikTok that has such an impact and has such a less controlled algorithm, if you are putting yourself into a position where you want to be open to that kind of alt-right crazy theories, right, you will see only those theories on your app. Now people can choose almost sometimes a bit what their reality is. But I mean, more like, I think in Belgium, those kind of elements are coming into everyone's mainstream attention as well.
It does work both ways. Through TikTok, you can find, hateful stuff and all of that. But it's also like queer kid in a small town, right? And I think about this because of you. And I grew up in the 90s as well. And even finding songs like that, particularly until you could go to clubs and stuff.
It's something I didn't think about in what I was saying, but you're right. That works both ways. Of course, if there's a little queer kid in maybe an isolated situation, because he looks up these things, he will be surrounded by that kind of love all of a sudden as well.
I think that visually with your performance, it's very clear that when it comes to queerness, it's so much more than just what you represent and bringing that into the performance. And with you talking about your chosen family, I'm curious whether that was just the way it naturally came about because these are the people you've been surrounded with, or if that was sort of a specific choice that you go, no, I want to make sure that this is a broader
Yeah, no, it was definitely, I think it was both. I felt intuitively like this is going to be about something more than just me. And also because the song was about thanking the people. So I was like, I'm going to put certain elements on national television that, especially in Belgium, won't necessarily be brought to a mainstream light. Meaning elements of ballroom culture, meaning elements of drag culture. And then it became immediately with me about, we have to find the right liaison in ballroom culture. And this is why we chose Pussy from the House of West. But it was definitely, I knew that I was sneaking messages that weren't particularly mainstream in Europe onto a very big stage.
Well, and speaking of important representation, I think it would be terrible to do this interview and not talk about the hats. And
it's so serious. I was like, what is he gonna say now? Yeah. And then it's hats. Okay, good.
Where do you get your hats?
I have a lot of hats, and my husband is not all too pleased about me and my accessories. There's a lot of bad hair days, and I was like, the great thing about a hat is you put it on, and that's already done. Like for me, fashion has always been something that's very playful and something that's very informative into my mood of the day, and it can lift my mood even if I find the right outfits.
I can imagine that queer people in tiny rooms all over Europe would see that performance and it would mean something to them.
They put up a message of people all over the world, from YouTube channels queer people, drag people who were talking about why they love the song. And it made me teary-eyed, of course, because I'm like, the song was meant to be a little pat on the shoulder for people who maybe needed that pat, to be like, this is all good. Like, look at where we came, and we're not going back to anywhere else than where we are right now.
How has that been for you post Eurovision?
It's been, one hell of a ride. And I think because we did what we did at Eurovision, we ended top 10. Also here in Belgium, there was a lot of pride. It was quite amazing too, because coming from what I just said, where in the beginning it was so polarizing and quite hateful, by the end of it, it felt like everyone was standing behind me all of a sudden. That was also quite amazing to feel. And that means that also now I feel like, here in Belgium, I'm kind of like, which is kind of bizarre, but I'm really part of like mainstream pop. I was nominated for like a sort of like a local Grammy Awardish kind of thing this summer, and I really was like, I'm here with like 20-year-olds. What the hell am I doing here? Like, it's, but it's kind of beautiful, because I feel like I'm not what people expect for a pop star, but that it's being embraced as well. But I'm still teaching, for example. I still do this, like we're in my studio. I still do my advertising work. But I think for the first time in my life, there's like a possibility for me to really focus on just being an artist myself.
That's amazing. That's amazing. While you're planning the tour, if you
throw New York in there,
if you want to take a trip over the Atlantic, Magnus has a guest room.
There we go. Exactly. If you want to stop by New York, let us know, and we'll
put you up.
We'll get the whole queer community together.
Well, never say never. I'm totally down for coming to New York. If we logistically we can make something happen, I'm down for sure.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for spending the time.
Thank you. You guys as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All the mysteries of the Euroverse.